The night was supposed to be calm. Outside, the rain fell in heavy sheets, rattling the windows of the Montgomery estate. Inside, the sound of crystal glasses clinking against marble echoed through the grand hall. But instead of warmth or love, the atmosphere carried a bitter chill. Ava Montgomery, 6 months pregnant, stood trembling at the bottom of the sweeping staircase, her arms wrapped protectively around her belly. She had just told her husband, Daniel, that the baby had kicked for the first time. She expected joy. She expected him to place his hand over her stomach and smile the way he once did. But Daniel didn't smile. He didn't even look at her. Instead, his sharp eyes darted toward the woman sitting casually on the velvet sofa, her legs crossed, her lips curled in a cruel smirk. Cassandra Reed, his mistress. Daniel, Ava whispered, her voice breaking. Why is she here? Daniel's laugh was hollow, cruel. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a thick roll of $100 bills, and tossed it across the room. The money scattered at Ava's feet, fluttering like broken leaves on the polished marble floor. You want to know why? His voice was sharp, filled with venom. Because you're nothing. You're a burden. You walk around this house acting like a queen, but you don't bring in a cent. You don't belong here anymore. Ava's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Her breath came short, every word like a dagger. She bent slowly, trying to steady herself, the weight of her unborn child pressing on her ribs. Cassandra's voice cut through the silence like poison. You heard him, sweetheart. Maybe you should just take the money and leave. It's not like you can give him what he truly deserves. Ava's eyes burned with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She lifted her chin, staring at the man she once thought would protect her forever. Daniel, I am your wife. I am carrying your child. But Daniel only stepped closer, towering over her. Not for long. Pack your things. Get out of my house tonight. I don't care where you go. Just go. The thunder outside roared, shaking the glass chandelier above them. Ava's knees weakened. She reached out, but there was nothing to hold on to. Nothing to keep her from collapsing under the crushing weight of betrayal. She looked down at the scattered bills. Money he thought was enough to erase her, to erase their vows, to erase the life they had built. Her vision blurred as her tears finally spilled, mixing with the rainwater that dripped in from the storm. Cassandra let out a low laugh, savoring the moment. Daniel, cold and unshaken, turned his back on the woman who had given him everything, her trust, her love, her loyalty. Ava clutched her belly, whispering to the child inside her, I won't let him destroy us. The front door slammed open, the wind howling into the hall. The storm outside seemed to mirror the one tearing through her soul. Ava staggered forward, stepping over the crumpled bills, her dignity barely holding her upright. As the door shut behind her, the echoes of Daniel's voice rang in her ears. Don't come back. You're nothing without me. But what Daniel didn't know, what would soon shake his entire world, was that Ava Montgomery was far from nothing. She was the rightful heir to a fortune that could buy and sell his entire empire. And when the truth came out, it would be his turn to beg. And on that stormy night, Daniel had no idea. The woman he had just thrown away was a hidden millionaire queen. Long before the stormy night when her husband threw her out, Ava Montgomery had lived a life that looked ordinary from the outside. She worked part-time at a small independent bookstore tucked into a quiet street in Manhattan. The shelves smelled of old paper and coffee, and customers often remembered her soft smile, her gentle voice, and the way she always recommended the perfect novel for a rainy afternoon. Nobody who walked into that bookstore could have imagined that the quiet young woman behind the counter was born into one of the wealthiest families in America. Ava had inherited millions from her late mother, but she had chosen to keep that truth hidden. Her mother, a woman of grace and deep wisdom, raised her to believe that money could buy comfort but not happiness. On her deathbed, she told Ava, "Promise me you'll never let wealth decide your worth or your love. Live as an ordinary woman until you find someone who sees you, not your fortune." Ava promised, and Ava kept her promise. So she traded designer gowns for second-hand sweaters. She drove a used car instead of the luxury vehicles she could have afforded. She lived in a modest apartment with peeling paint and creaky floors. For Ava, it wasn't punishment, it was freedom. She wanted a chance to be loved without suspicion, without the shadow of her last name. When she met Daniel Montgomery, she thought her prayers had been answered. He was charismatic, ambitious, and attentive. At least at first. They met at a car dealership where Ava had gone to buy a used sedan. Daniel, then a rising salesman with slick charm and piercing blue eyes, was captivated by her simplicity. She wore jeans and a plain cardigan that day, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like the opposite of the glamorous women he usually chased. Ava believed this was proof he liked her for who she was. Within 6 months, they were married in a simple ceremony at City Hall. Ava didn't tell him about her inheritance. She wanted to believe she had found the rare kind of love her mother had hoped for her. For a while, she was happy. She loved the way Daniel made her laugh, the way he spoke of big dreams, the way he held her hand as though he would never let go. But cracks began to show after their wedding. Daniel complained about bills, about the cost of groceries, about how Ava wasn't contributing enough. He compared her to other wives who worked more, who earned more, who pulled their weight. Ava quietly picked up extra shifts at the bookstore, even while battling morning sickness during her pregnancy. She would come home exhausted, clutching prenatal vitamins that Daniel mocked as unnecessary luxuries. Still, Ava believed in her vows. She told herself marriage was about patience, about sacrifice. She reminded herself of her promise to her mother to live simply, to love sincerely. She thought if she just endured long enough, Daniel would see her devotion. But love can't survive where respect is absent. And respect was exactly what Daniel began to strip from her, piece by piece. He spent money on expensive suits and weekends away for business, while lecturing her about the price of baby clothes. He sneered when she gained pregnancy weight, accusing her of letting herself go. Through it all, Ava held her head high in public, never letting anyone see her tears. Behind closed doors, however, she would sit by the nursery she had decorated alone, whispering to her unborn child, "I'll keep you safe. No matter what, I'll keep you safe." The night Daniel threw money at her and ordered her out of the house wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of an illusion. The man she thought loved her was nothing more than a mask, and Ava, though heartbroken and fragile, would soon learn she was stronger than she ever imagined. Because sometimes it takes being shattered to realize the diamond you've always been. The Montgomery estate stood on the northern edge of New York City, a sprawling mansion of glass and stone that seemed more like a museum than a home. Its marble floors reflected the light of glittering chandeliers, and every corner was dressed with imported art pieces Daniel boasted about at every opportunity. From the outside, it was the picture of success. To the world, Daniel Montgomery was a man who had built an empire, a symbol of ambition and wealth. Inside those walls, however, Ava felt like a ghost haunting a place she never truly belonged. Every gala Daniel hosted was the same. Guests draped in designer gowns, the scent of champagne filling the air, and a live orchestra playing for people too busy networking to listen. Daniel thrived in this world, shaking hands with real estate tycoons, laughing too loudly at jokes told by men in tailored tuxedos, and introducing Cassandra as his business associate, while his arm lingered too long at her waist. For Ava, these gatherings were a stage where she had no script. She walked carefully, smiled politely, and endured whispers from the other wives who noticed how Daniel's attention strayed. She could feel their eyes on her belly, hear their hushed voices. "She doesn't fit in, she's plain, he could do better." She never defended herself, not because she lacked courage, but because she didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Her world outside the mansion could not have been more different. In her small bookstore job, Ava felt human. The dusty shelves, the regular customers, even the squeak of the old cash register gave her a sense of peace. There, she wasn't Mrs. Montgomery, the quiet wife of a flashy millionaire. She was simply Ava, a woman who loved stories, who could recommend a novel to a lonely teenager or a poetry book to an elderly widow. But Daniel saw the bookstore as a stain on his image. "You're embarrassing me," he once told her. "My wife shouldn't be behind a counter like some cashier." The words had cut deep, though Ava never let him see how much. What Daniel didn't know, what he never cared to ask, was that Ava's bookstore life was not about money. It was about staying connected to the ordinary world, to the promise she made her mother, and to the sense of self that Daniel could never touch. As months passed, the contrast between their worlds grew starker. Daniel's nights stretched longer, filled with rooftop parties and business trips that ended with excuses. Ava's nights were quiet, spent sitting by the crib she had prepared for the baby, humming lullabies into the soft glow of the nursery lamp. The ultimate stage for their fractured marriage, however, was the annual Bright Futures Gala, a massive charity event hosted at the Crystal Renaissance Hotel. It was Daniel's favorite night of the year. Hundreds of powerful men and women gathered under glittering chandeliers to donate money that doubled as a chance to flaunt their wealth. It was also the perfect place for Daniel to show off his success, and the perfect place for Ava's humiliation to unfold. That evening, Ava dressed in a simple navy gown, the only formal dress she owned. She placed her hands on her swollen belly, whispering, "We'll get through this," before stepping into the limousine Daniel had ordered. She thought she was accompanying her husband to support him. What she didn't know was that he had planned to showcase Cassandra, the mistress, under the blinding lights of the gala. The ballroom shimmered with gold, laughter rising like smoke, crystal glasses clinking in toasts. Daniel walked proudly, his hand brushing against Cassandra's back, as if she were the queen of the evening. And Ava, clutching her small clutch bag, followed a few steps behind, invisible in the world her husband worshipped. It was the beginning of a night that would strip her dignity in front of hundreds and ignite the fire she never knew burned inside her. Daniel Montgomery wasn't born into wealth. He often reminded people of that fact, spinning it into a tale of grit and ambition. "I built everything with my own 2 hands," he would brag, sipping vintage scotch at gatherings. In truth, much of his success came from ruthless shortcuts, risky loans, and the careful manipulation of people who trusted him. To the world, he was a self-made millionaire with a golden touch. But behind closed doors, Daniel was driven by something darker, an insatiable hunger for validation, status, and control. Cassandra Reed entered his life like a spark thrown onto dry kindling. Young, beautiful, and dangerously ambitious, she worked in public relations at one of Daniel's partner firms. She was quick-witted, with a smile that could melt resistance and eyes that promised both loyalty and danger. She had no interest in love. What she craved was elevation. Daniel saw in her what he thought Ava lacked: glamour, boldness, and the ability to play the part of a trophy wife in his glittering world. The two began their affair under the thin disguise of business dinners. Cassandra knew exactly how to stroke Daniel's ego. She flattered his every move, laughed at his tired jokes, and whispered promises of a future where he didn't have to carry the weight of a plain, pregnant wife. For Daniel, the choice seemed simple: a woman who demanded nothing but gave him everything, or a wife who, in his twisted view, offered only burdens. Cassandra's cruelty was subtle but sharp. She would linger too long at Daniel's side during public events, brush her hand against his arm when Ava was watching, and slip comments that cut like knives. "You look tired, Ava," she once said with a false sweetness. "Pregnancy can really take the glow out of a woman, can't it?" Daniel laughed, and Ava's heart broke a little more. At the Bright Futures Gala, Daniel's mask of loyalty shattered completely. He introduced Cassandra to investors as though she were already his partner, ignoring the fact that his pregnant wife stood a few feet away. Cameras flashed, capturing Cassandra's radiant smile as she leaned into Daniel's arm. Reporters whispered, some recognizing Ava, some assuming she was a distant relative or a forgotten guest. Ava's cheeks burned, but Daniel didn't even glance her way. Later that night, Cassandra played her part with precision. She whispered in Daniel's ear, loud enough for Ava to overhear. "Imagine what people will say when you finally move on. You deserve someone who matches your power." Daniel's smirk said everything. He was already planning to discard the woman who had given him loyalty and devotion. What made Daniel truly dangerous was his belief that money excused everything. In his mind, throwing a stack of cash at Ava was enough to erase his vows, his responsibilities, and even the child growing inside her. He saw her as an expense, a liability he was eager to remove from his perfect image. And Cassandra fueled that fire, convincing him that Ava's departure was not just necessary but inevitable. To the outside world, Daniel and Cassandra sparkled. They looked like a power couple on the rise, handsome, ambitious, glamorous. But behind the glitter, they were bound by greed, vanity, and a shared disdain for the woman they had crushed under their heels. As Ava stood in the corner of that grand ballroom, watching her husband flaunt his mistress under 1,000 glittering lights, a realization settled into her heart. This wasn't just betrayal. It was war. And Daniel and Cassandra had just lit the match that would one day burn their empire to ash. The Bright Futures Gala was meant to shine as a night of elegance and generosity. But for Ava Montgomery, it became the stage of her deepest humiliation. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, polished marble floors, and tables adorned with white roses. Cameras flashed as New York's elite filled the room, eager to see and be seen. Ava, 6 months pregnant, smoothed the fabric of her simple navy gown, trying to hide the nervous tremor in her hands. She told herself she could survive the night as long as Daniel stayed by her side. But Daniel had other plans. As the orchestra played a sweeping melody, Daniel climbed the stage with Cassandra at his arm. Not Ava. Cassandra shimmered in a crimson gown that hugged every curve, the kind of dress meant to steal attention. The crowd gasped at the audacity of it. Some whispered, some smirked, and others simply watched with the cold curiosity reserved for scandal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Daniel announced into the microphone, his voice booming with pride. "Tonight is not only about giving back, it's about celebrating the future, about standing beside those who elevate us." He gestured toward Cassandra, who smiled and waved gracefully, as though she were the rightful lady of the house. "I couldn't be where I am without extraordinary support. Please welcome Cassandra Reed, my closest partner." The words sliced through Ava like glass. Closest partner. Not his wife, not the mother of his unborn child. No acknowledgement of the woman standing silently at the edge of the crowd, clutching her belly as though to protect her baby from the venom in his voice. A ripple of whispers spread across the ballroom. "Isn't his wife pregnant?" one woman muttered. "That can't be her," another replied, glancing toward Ava with a mix of pity and disdain. Ava felt the weight of every gaze pressing down on her, turning her body into a spectacle. She wanted to vanish, to dissolve into the marble floor. Daniel and Cassandra descended the stage, basking in the glow of flashing cameras. Cassandra leaned in, whispering something that made Daniel laugh loudly, his hand resting on her waist. The photographers ate it up, capturing image after image that would flood society columns by morning. Ava knew exactly what the headlines would say. "Montgomery's stunning mistress steals the spotlight." She tried to slip away quietly, but Cassandra's sharp eyes caught her. With deliberate cruelty, she approached Ava, her smile a mask of sweetness. "Oh, Ava, you made it," she said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "How brave of you to come tonight. Pregnancy can be so exhausting, can't it?" The laughter that followed felt like knives in Ava's back. Daniel didn't defend her. He didn't even look at her. Instead, he tightened his grip on Cassandra, as though to announce to the world that his choice was final. Ava's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. She stood tall, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her collapse. But inside, she was crumbling. Every ounce of dignity she had clung to was stripped away under the glittering lights of the ballroom. The vows Daniel had once made were nothing but ashes, scattered in the air with each mocking laugh. When the orchestra shifted to a lively tune, Ava slipped out a side door, her steps heavy, her heart shattered. She leaned against the cold stone wall of the hotel, the night air sharp against her flushed cheeks. For the first time, she whispered aloud the truth she had been too afraid to face. "He doesn't love me. He never did." The gala raged on behind her, laughter and music spilling through the doors. But for Ava, the night was over. She had been erased in public, discarded like a shadow. What no one realized, not Daniel, not Cassandra, not the watching crowd, was that humiliation was not the end of Ava's story. It was only the beginning. The hotel's side alley was quiet, save for the muffled pulse of music drifting from the ballroom. Ava leaned against the damp stone wall, her breath uneven, her vision blurred with tears. The cool night air cut through her thin gown, but she hardly noticed. Her chest heaved with sobs she tried desperately to silence, as though hiding her pain would keep her dignity intact. But dignity had already been stripped away. Her swollen feet throbbed from hours in heels, her back ached from the weight of the child she carried, and her heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. She pressed her palm to her belly, whispering through trembling lips, "I'm so sorry, little one. I thought your father would be better than this. I thought he would protect us." The baby kicked softly, as if reminding her that she was not entirely alone. But the reminder only deepened her sorrow. She had envisioned a life where Daniel would hold their child, where they would laugh together in the nursery, where she would watch him transform into the father she believed he could be. Now, those dreams lay in ruins, trampled by betrayal and arrogance. She sank to the ground, her gown pooling around her in the shadows. Rainwater seeped into the hem of the fabric, chilling her legs. Ava's sobs echoed softly in the narrow alleyway. For the first time since her mother's passing, she felt utterly abandoned. No family, no husband, no one to shield her from the cruelty of the world. Just a woman, pregnant and broken, discarded by the man who should have cherished her most. Her mind replayed every moment of the evening like a cruel film reel. Daniel on stage with Cassandra, the way the crowd whispered, Cassandra's cutting words disguised as kindness. Each memory stabbed deeper, confirming the truth Ava had tried so hard to deny. Daniel had never truly loved her. He loved what she represented: obedience, admiration, the image of a wife who didn't challenge him. And now, with her pregnancy, she was no longer convenient. The weight of betrayal pressed so heavily on her chest that Ava struggled to breathe. Panic rose, sharp and suffocating. She clutched her belly, terrified for her baby's safety. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Please, stay with me." A passerby, a hotel staff member, spotted her curled against the wall. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, concern flickering in his eyes. Ava forced herself to nod, though her tear-streaked face betrayed the truth. "I'm fine," she lied, pushing herself unsteadily to her feet. She couldn't bear the thought of pity, not from strangers, not from anyone. She stumbled into the night, avoiding the main street where gala guests might see her. Instead, she walked aimlessly, the city lights blurring through her tears. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the world itself conspired to drag her down. She thought of calling Daniel, begging him to reconsider. But pride and pain stopped her. She thought of revealing her fortune, showing him that she was not the powerless woman he believed. But then, she remembered her mother's voice. Love without truth is not love at all. By the time Ava reached her modest apartment, her body was trembling from exhaustion. She collapsed onto the couch, clutching the small pillow she had stitched for the nursery. Tears soaked the fabric as she whispered into the silence, "How do I go on? How do I raise this child alone?" The walls offered no answer. The night stretched endlessly, filled only with the sound of her sobs and the faint hum of the city outside. And though Ava didn't know it yet, this moment of despair, this collapse into darkness, would be the seed of her rebirth. Because sometimes a woman must be broken before she learns how to rise. The following morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the blinds of Ava's small apartment. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her body heavy from exhaustion, but she forced herself to rise. She couldn't afford to break completely. She had a child to protect. She made a simple cup of tea, her trembling hands struggling to hold the mug steady. The steam curled upward, carrying with it a question that refused to leave her mind. What now? Her phone buzzed. For a moment, her heart lurched, hoping against reason that Daniel might have called to apologize. But the screen showed another name. William Carter. He had been her family's lawyer for decades, a man her mother trusted with everything. Ava hadn't spoken to him in months, not since she had insisted on living quietly, away from the wealth her family had left her. "Ava?" William's voice was calm, firm, yet tinged with concern. "I heard what happened last night. Are you safe?" Her throat tightened. "Safe? If you mean humiliated, betrayed, and tossed aside while carrying his child, then yes, I'm safe." There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, carrying a weight Ava knew well, the weight of truth. "It's time," he said. "You've hidden long enough. Your mother left you more than memories, Ava. She left you an empire. And Daniel has no idea the woman he discarded is the majority shareholder in the very companies he depends on." Ava gripped the phone, her breath catching. "I can't. I promised her I'd live simply, without letting money define me." Your mother wanted you to live freely, William corrected gently. She never wanted you to let someone trample your dignity. This isn't about money, it's about power and protecting yourself and your child. If you stay silent, Daniel wins. If you step forward, you reclaim your life. His words struck deep. For months, Ava had endured Daniel's cruelty, convincing herself patience was virtue. But patience had only fed his arrogance. Now she saw the truth. Her silence had been mistaken for weakness. As if on cue, a knock echoed at her door. Ava hesitated, then opened it to find her aunt, Eleanor. Her kind eyes brimmed with unshed tears as she gathered Ava into her arms. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered. "I warned you about him, but he won't get away with this. Not anymore." Ava clung to her aunt, feeling the warmth of family she thought she had lost. Eleanor pulled back, her voice steady. "Do you remember what your mother told us? That one day, if anyone tried to destroy you, we would remind them exactly who you are." Ava's heart pounded. She had spent years hiding behind ordinary walls, believing her strength lay in invisibility. But maybe her true strength had been waiting, quiet, patient, for the moment she needed it most. That evening, Ava met William in his downtown office. The room smelled of leather and oak, lined with shelves of heavy legal tomes. William laid a folder on the polished desk. Inside were documents Ava hadn't looked at in years. Deeds, stock certificates, trust accounts. Her name, Ava Elizabeth Montgomery, was printed on every page. "Daniel's company has been surviving on loans from one of these firms," William explained, tapping the papers. "A firm you control. He's building his empire on ground that belongs to you. If you choose to reveal this, his world collapses overnight." Ava stared at the papers, her hands trembling. The woman she had been, the one who lived quietly, who endured humiliation, felt far away now. In her place stood someone new, someone fierce, someone ready. She closed the folder with steady fingers, her eyes blazing with determination. "Then it's time Daniel learns the truth. He threw me out like I was nothing, but soon he'll know exactly who I am." Because the woman he abandoned wasn't just his wife. She was the queen of everything he thought he owned. The decision was made. That night, as Ava walked out of William's office with the folder of documents pressed against her chest, the city lights seemed different. For weeks, New York had felt like a cage, its glowing towers mocking her loneliness. Now, the same skyline looked like a battlefield, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. Back at her apartment, Ava placed the folder on the table and stood in front of the mirror. What she saw was a woman with swollen eyes, her hair tangled, her gown still damp from rain. But behind the exhaustion, there was something new: fire. The reflection staring back at her wasn't just a pregnant woman discarded by her husband. It was the daughter of a queen, the heir to a fortune, the survivor of betrayal. The next morning, Eleanor arrived with a suitcase. "We're done living small," her aunt declared. "Your mother left you power. Use it." She pulled out tailored dresses, silk blouses, and a navy coat that fit Ava's growing body perfectly. Ava hesitated, brushing her hand along the smooth fabric. "I don't recognize myself in these," she whispered. Eleanor smiled knowingly. "You will. Because this is who you've always been. Not the girl Daniel humiliated, not the cashier he mocked. You are Ava Montgomery, and you are more than enough." Step by step, Ava allowed herself to transform. She visited a salon, where her long hair was styled into soft waves that framed her determined face. Her nails, once chipped from shelving books, now gleamed with polish. She slipped into a dark green dress that hugged her figure with elegance, the kind of dress that commanded attention rather than begged for it. When she looked in the mirror again, she didn't see weakness. She saw resilience cloaked in grace. But transformation wasn't just about appearance. It was about reclaiming her mind. William arranged discreet meetings to prepare her for the battles ahead. Ava studied financial reports late into the night, memorizing figures and learning how Daniel's company had entangled itself with her holdings. The numbers told a clear story. Daniel was living on borrowed time, and that time belonged to her. There were moments of doubt. She would sit by the crib in her apartment, holding the tiny blanket she had knitted, and wonder if she was strong enough. "What if I fail?" she whispered once to Eleanor. Her aunt placed a hand on her shoulder, her voice steady. "You've already survived the worst, Ava. Failure is behind you. Ahead is only victory." Day by day, Ava's spirit hardened. The woman who had once begged Daniel for scraps of affection was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood her worth, not because of money, but because she had endured betrayal and still stood tall. Her final step of transformation came in the form of a decision, to confront Daniel not as his wife, but as his equal, or rather his superior. She wouldn't beg for dignity. She would demand it. She wouldn't hide behind silence. She would expose him for the fraud he was. As she slipped into her tailored coat one crisp evening, William handed her a simple card. "Tomorrow," he said, "there's a board meeting at his company. He expects it to be routine. He has no idea who's about to walk in." Ava tightened her grip on the card, her heart steady. The woman who had been humiliated at the gala was gone. The woman walking into that boardroom would be reborn. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in tearing someone down, it's in rising so high they can never touch you again. The Montgomery building gleamed under the mid-morning sun, its glass facade reflecting the bustle of Manhattan's financial district. Inside, Daniel Montgomery was already holding court, striding across the boardroom with the arrogance of a man who thought he had the world at his feet. Cassandra sat near the head of the long mahogany table, draped in a sleek black dress, smirking at the older board members as though she belonged there. "This expansion deal will solidify our place in the market," Daniel announced confidently, gesturing to charts projected on the screen. "The investors are behind me, and within months we'll triple our profits. Gentlemen, this is the future of Montgomery Holdings." Polite applause followed, though a few skeptical glances lingered. Daniel didn't notice. He was too busy basking in his own performance. Then the doors opened. Every head turned. A hush fell over the room. Ava Montgomery stepped inside. She was unrecognizable from the woman Daniel had discarded. Her dark green dress draped elegantly over her figure, her hair fell in polished waves, and her eyes, once dulled by heartbreak, now burned with quiet fire. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing like a countdown. Daniel's smirk faltered. "Ava, what the hell are you doing here?" Cassandra's eyes narrowed, her hand tightening on Daniel's arm. "She doesn't belong here," she hissed under her breath. But Ava kept walking, her chin high, her posture regal. She stopped at the head of the table, directly across from Daniel. William, the family lawyer, entered behind her, carrying a sleek leather folder. He placed it gently before Ava, then stepped back. "Gentlemen," Ava said, her voice steady and clear, "my name is Ava Montgomery, and as of this morning, I am your majority shareholder." The words struck like thunder. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's face drained of color. He laughed nervously, trying to regain control. "That's impossible. This is my company. Your company?" Ava cut in, her tone sharp as steel. "Your company has been running on loans from Carter Holdings. Loans you've defaulted on. Loans that give me controlling interest." She opened the folder, sliding the documents across the table. "Every signature, every agreement, every debt, all under my name." The board members leaned forward, eyes wide as they scanned the papers. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some looked at Daniel with open disgust. Others exchanged knowing glances. Daniel's fists clenched. "You tricked me," he spat. Ava didn't flinch. "No, Daniel, you underestimated me. You thought I was powerless because I chose to live simply. You thought throwing money at me would erase my worth. But you were wrong. I am not your burden. I am not your shadow. I am the woman who owns everything you thought you controlled." Cassandra shifted uncomfortably, her confidence cracking. "She's bluffing," she whispered, but her voice shook. Ava's gaze swept over her, cold and cutting. "And you," she said, "enjoy your seat while you can. Because in this room, mistresses don't make decisions. Power does." The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly, his carefully crafted image unraveling before the very men whose respect he craved. Ava, calm and unshaken, rested her hand on her belly. "This company will no longer be run by greed, lies, or betrayal," she declared. "From this moment forward, Montgomery Holdings answers to me." The room erupted, some in applause, others in stunned silence. Cameras clicked as a reporter, tipped off by William, snapped photos from the doorway. Daniel's empire, once untouchable, was crumbling in real time. And Ava, the woman he had thrown out into the storm, stood tall at the center of it all. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply showing up as the queen you were always meant to be. The annual Metropolitan Charity Gala was the crown jewel of New York's social calendar. The ballroom sparkled beneath chandeliers dripping with crystal, the air heavy with perfume, champagne, and whispered ambition. Everyone who mattered was there: politicians, CEOs, celebrities. And at the center of it all, Daniel Montgomery arrived with Cassandra Reed on his arm, determined to reclaim the spotlight he had lost. He wore a tuxedo, tailored within an inch of perfection, his smile wide though strained. Cassandra glittered in a gown of gold sequins, her laughter ringing like glass as cameras flashed. To the crowd, they looked untouchable, a couple of power and glamour. But behind Daniel's eyes lurked panic. The boardroom confrontation still haunted him. Whispers about Ava's ownership spreading faster than wildfire. He was desperate to prove he still ruled the stage, and then she walked in. The music seemed to pause, the chatter dimming into a hush. Ava Montgomery entered the ballroom, radiant in a sweeping black gown with a sapphire necklace that caught every glimmer of light. Her hair cascaded in soft waves, her posture regal. She was 6 months pregnant, yet she carried herself with the elegance of a queen. On her arm was William Carter, her lawyer and ally, whose presence alone told the world this was not a social visit. It was a statement. The cameras swiveled, flashbulbs exploding as reporters gasped. That's her. That's his wife. That's the woman who owns Montgomery Holdings. Daniel's face turned ashen. Cassandra's smirk faltered, her grip tightening on his arm. Ava's eyes found them across the room, calm and piercing. She didn't rush toward them. She let the crowd take in the sight, let the whispers grow into a roar. The woman they thought was forgotten, humiliated, erased, was back, and she had come to reign. When the host invited major donors to the stage, Daniel puffed his chest and stepped forward, dragging Cassandra with him. Tonight, he announced into the microphone, Montgomery Holdings is pledging $5 million. Correction. Ava's voice rang out, clear and commanding. All eyes turned. Ava strode onto the stage, her heels striking the marble with deliberate rhythm. She took the microphone from the stunned host and faced the audience. As majority shareholder of Montgomery Holdings, I am proud to announce that this company will indeed pledge $5 million. But tonight, that pledge comes from me. Gasps erupted across the ballroom. Murmurs swelled like waves crashing against the shore. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in on Daniel, whose face was flushed with fury and shame. Cassandra tried to smile, but her hands trembled. Ava continued, her voice steady, her hand resting on her belly. I was cast aside, humiliated, told I was nothing. But tonight proves what I've always known. Women are not weak, not disposable, not shadows to a man's ambition. We are strength. We are resilience. And when we rise higher than those who try to break us. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers echoing beneath the chandeliers. Some guests stood, clapping until their hands stung. The tide had turned. Society wasn't laughing at Ava anymore. They were celebrating her. Daniel tried to grab the microphone, sputtering, "She's lying, she's nothing without me." But the audience wasn't listening. A reporter shouted from the crowd, "Mr. Montgomery, how does it feel knowing your wife owns your company?" Cameras flashed mercilessly. Cassandra tried to tug him away, but it was too late. Their downfall was unfolding live in front of New York's elite. Ava turned, her eyes locking with Daniel's. For the first time, he looked small, cornered, powerless. She handed the microphone back to the host and walked off the stage, the applause following her like a coronation march. That night, under the glow of 1,000 lights, Daniel Montgomery learned the truth. The woman he had thrown away was no victim. She was a queen. The morning after the gala, the newspapers told a story Daniel Montgomery could never erase. Billionaire's wife revealed as true owner of Montgomery Holdings. Pregnant heiress stuns society, humiliates husband and mistress. Daniel's phone buzzed endlessly, not with congratulations but with calls from furious investors, abandoned business partners, and scandal-hungry reporters. The image he had carefully built, ambitious, untouchable, powerful, was shattered overnight. His empire no longer belonged to him. The contracts, the properties, the bank accounts, everything was tied to Ava. Cassandra sat at the edge of his bed in their hotel suite, scrolling through her phone. Each headline slashed through her carefully polished mask of confidence. She had attached herself to Daniel because she believed he was her ticket to power, her escape from obscurity. But now all she saw in the mirror was a woman clinging to a sinking ship. "Say something," she snapped, her voice shrill. "Fix this, Daniel. Spin it. Do what you always do." Daniel rubbed his face with trembling hands. "There's nothing to fix. It's gone. Everything's gone." Cassandra's lips curled in disgust. "Then what good are you to me?" It was the beginning of the end for them. By noon, Montgomery Holdings' board of directors had convened without Daniel. Ava, calm and commanding, sat at the head of the table while Daniel was escorted out of the building by security. Cameras captured the moment, flashing lights, freezing his humiliation into history. He shoved past the reporters, his face red with rage, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The fallout spread quickly. Investors withdrew, business partners severed ties, even the charities Daniel once flaunted refused his donations. Within weeks, his accounts were frozen, pending investigations into financial misconduct that Ava's team uncovered. The mansion he once paraded guests through was repossessed, its doors locked against him. And Cassandra? Society turned on her with equal cruelty. The same magazines that once praised her beauty now labeled her a homewrecker, a gold digger, a disgrace. Invitations to elite events vanished, brands she had partnered with dropped her instantly. Stripped of glamour, she was left standing in the cold shadow of a man who no longer had anything to offer. One evening, as Daniel sat hunched in a cheap bar, nursing a glass of whiskey he could barely afford, Cassandra stormed in. Her eyes burned with fury. "You promised me the world," she shouted. Heads turned, whispers filled the room. "And what did I get? Ruin. You've dragged me down with you." Daniel sneered, his bitterness spilling out. "You wanted money, Cassandra. You wanted power. Guess what? So did I. And now we've both lost." With that, Cassandra walked out, her heels clattering against the sticky floor, leaving Daniel slumped and alone. Meanwhile, Ava's life was transforming. Where Daniel and Cassandra saw ruin, Ava saw rebirth. She returned to the gala circuit, not as a silent accessory, but as a respected leader. Businessmen who once dismissed her now sought her approval. Women whispered her name with admiration, inspired by her strength. For Daniel, however, the punishment was relentless. Lawsuits mounted, debt collectors circled. The empire he had built on lies crumbled piece by piece. The man who once threw money at his pregnant wife now struggled to pay his own rent. His arrogance, his cruelty, his betrayal, all had come back to devour him. And for Cassandra, the glittering doors of society slammed shut. She tried to claw her way back, but without Daniel's fading name, she was just another woman discarded by a world that thrived on scandal. Together, they had mocked Ava. Together, they had believed they were untouchable. And together, they fell, harder than either could have imagined. Because betrayal may bring temporary pleasure, but karma brings permanent punishment. The chaos of the past weeks had been relentless. Boardroom battles, public confrontations, and the fiery downfall of Daniel and Cassandra. Yet for Ava Montgomery, the noise finally began to fade. One evening, she returned to her quiet apartment, not as a broken wife, but as a woman reborn. The city lights flickered outside her window, a glittering reminder of the world she now controlled. But inside, the atmosphere was calm. Ava slipped off her heels, her body weary from meetings and interviews, and made her way to the nursery. The soft pastel walls greeted her with warmth, the crib waiting patiently for the life growing inside her. She sat in the rocking chair, her hands resting gently on her swollen belly. For the first time in weeks, her tears weren't born of sorrow. They were tears of release. "We did it," she whispered softly, her voice trembling with relief. "He can't hurt us anymore. We're safe now." The baby kicked, a small but powerful reminder of the bond between mother and child. Ava smiled through her tears, stroking the curve of her belly. "You're my reason," she continued. "My strength. When I wanted to give up, I thought of you. And that's why we're still standing." Her mind wandered back to the darkest nights, crying in the rain outside the gala, clutching her belly in fear, feeling utterly abandoned. The pain was still raw, but now it felt different. Instead of chains, it was a lesson. Instead of weakness, it was proof of her endurance. She realized that surviving betrayal had not broken her. It had carved her into something stronger, something unshakable. Aunt Eleanor joined her quietly, carrying a cup of warm chamomile tea. "You look different," Eleanor said gently, handing her the cup. "Not just stronger, lighter somehow." Ava smiled faintly. Because for the first time, I'm not pretending. I don't have to hide who I am. Not from Daniel, not from the world, not even from myself. I spent so long shrinking, thinking love meant losing pieces of me. But love, real love, should never cost who you are. Eleanor squeezed her hand, her eyes shining with pride. Your mother would be so proud, Ava. She wanted you to live, not just survive. And now you're doing both. As the night deepened, Ava opened the folder of documents William had given her weeks before. She studied the papers with steady eyes, not out of fear but out of purpose. The companies, the assets, the fortune. It wasn't just wealth. It was a legacy, a tool she could use to build something better, not only for herself but for her child. She whispered to the unborn baby again. You'll never grow up watching someone disrespect me. You'll never see me beg for love that isn't real. You'll know that we are enough, just as we are. And when you're old enough, I'll tell you about the night your father threw money at us and told us to leave. I'll tell you how that night became the reason we found our strength. The baby kicked again, stronger this time, as though answering her vow. Ava laughed softly, the sound filling the nursery like music. For the first time in months, she felt peace. The storm had passed, the betrayal was behind her, and what lay ahead was not fear, but promise. As she turned off the nursery lamp, Ava paused, her hand still on her belly. We're not victims, she whispered into the dark. We're survivors, and we're going to shine brighter than they ever imagined. Because true healing doesn't come when the world apologizes. It comes when you realize you never needed its approval in the first place. Ava Montgomery had faced storms and walked through fire, but now, for the first time, she was ready to build. Not for Daniel, not for appearances, but for herself and her unborn child. The following weeks were filled with long days and longer nights. Ava sat at the head of boardroom tables once dominated by Daniel, her presence commanding but calm. Men who once dismissed her as the quiet wife now leaned forward, listening closely to her every word. She wasn't just reading from prepared notes, she spoke with clarity, vision, and conviction. We're not just chasing profit anymore, she told the directors of Montgomery Holdings during her first official meeting as majority shareholder. We're creating stability, integrity, and a future that values people as much as numbers. The days of reckless deals and vanity projects are over. There was silence at first, then nods, then applause. For the first time in the company's history, the boardroom wasn't ruled by arrogance, but by purpose. But Ava's rebuilding wasn't only professional. At home, she transformed her modest apartment into a sanctuary. She decorated the nursery with care. Soft yellow walls, a mobile of stars above the crib, shelves lined with storybooks she couldn't wait to read aloud. The space reflected not wealth, but love. It was a promise to her child. You will grow up surrounded by warmth, not greed. Eleanor often visited, bringing meals and gentle encouragement. William guided her through complex contracts, teaching her not just how to protect her fortune, but how to grow it responsibly. For Ava, every step forward was both terrifying and liberating. She was no longer living in hiding. She was no longer afraid of her power. Still, there were moments of doubt. Some nights she sat awake, her hand on her belly, wondering if she could balance it all. Motherhood, leadership, healing. But each time fear crept in, she remembered the woman she had been on that stormy night, thrown into the rain with nothing but her dignity. If she could survive that, she could survive anything. The media, hungry for her story, painted her as the symbol of resilience. Headlines celebrated her rise. From humiliation to power, Ava Montgomery reclaims her throne. Pregnant heiress turns betrayal into triumph. Women wrote letters, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. Ava read them late at night, tears in her eyes, realizing her battle was no longer just her own. It was a beacon for others. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, Ava returned home and lowered herself into the rocking chair in the nursery. She held a small onesie against her chest, inhaling the faint scent of cotton. We're building something new, little one, she whispered. Not just wealth, but a life that means something. A life where love and respect come first. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a journalist requesting an interview. Ava hesitated, then typed her reply. Yes, I'll share my story. Not for revenge, but for every woman who needs to know she can rise again. That night, she looked out the window at the glowing city skyline. Where once she had seen only cages and shadows, she now saw opportunity. The future was wide open, and for the first time in years, she felt ready to step into it fully. Ava Montgomery was no longer a hidden heiress, no longer a silenced wife. She was a leader, a mother-to-be, and a woman who had rebuilt her life from ashes into something unshakable. Because rebuilding isn't just about reclaiming what was lost, it's about creating something better than you ever imagined. Daniel Montgomery had lost everything: his company, his reputation, his wealth. Yet, like a wounded predator, he refused to accept defeat. For weeks, he schemed in the shadows, clinging to the belief that if he could just face Ava one last time, he could manipulate her into surrendering. The opportunity came when Ava scheduled a press conference to announce a new initiative under her leadership. The event was held in the grand atrium of Montgomery Holdings, with reporters, investors, and cameras packed shoulder to shoulder. It was to be her moment of triumph, the world's confirmation that she had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. Ava arrived radiant in a tailored cream suit, her baby bump visible but embraced with pride. She walked confidently to the podium, William and Eleanor by her side. Flashbulbs exploded as the crowd hushed. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm, commanding. "Today we move forward, not just as a company, but as a community committed to integrity and resilience. Betrayal cannot define us. Only truth can." The applause was immediate. But before she could continue, a commotion erupted at the back of the atrium. Daniel forced his way through, his suit wrinkled, his eyes wild. Gasps rippled across the room as security rushed forward, but he raised his hands. "Let me speak," he shouted. "This is my company, my legacy." The cameras swiveled. The moment was live. Ava held up a hand, stopping the guards. She turned to face him, her expression steady. "Your legacy?" she repeated. "Daniel, your legacy is greed, lies, and betrayal, and it ends today." He stumbled closer, desperation dripping from every word. "Ava, listen to me. We can fix this. You don't know what it's like without me. You can't do this alone. Let me back in. I'll make it right." Laughter rippled through the crowd, not at Ava, but at him. The mighty Daniel Montgomery, once the picture of confidence, was now begging publicly for mercy. Cassandra was nowhere in sight. She had already abandoned him when the money dried up. Ava didn't flinch. She stepped out from behind the podium, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she faced him directly. "You told me I was nothing without you," she said, her voice ringing through the hall. "But look around, Daniel. I am standing here stronger than ever. And you're the one begging." He reached for her arm, but William stepped forward, blocking him. Cameras captured every second, the image of Daniel being pushed back by security already circulating online. His voice cracked, rage and panic twisting together. "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." Ava's eyes burned with fierce calm. "I survived you, Daniel. That means I can survive anything." She turned back to the audience, her voice steady. "Let today be proof no woman is powerless when she refuses to stay silent." The atrium erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions, investors nodded with approval, and the world witnessed Daniel's final collapse. He was dragged out of the building, his shouts echoing uselessly. For the first time, his name carried not fear, not respect, but pity. Ava returned to the podium, her hand resting on her belly. She didn't need to look at Daniel anymore. His story was over. Hers was just beginning. Because the truest victory isn't in destroying your enemy. It's in proving they never had power over you at all. Weeks after Daniel's dramatic collapse at the press conference, the world seemed to have shifted. Where Ava once walked unnoticed, whispered about, or pitied, she now walked with respect trailing behind her like a royal cloak. The same society that had laughed at her humiliation at the gala now leaned forward to hear her speak. It became official on the night of the Women of Influence Awards, an annual event honoring leaders who had not only achieved success, but had also inspired others to rise. For the first time, Ava Montgomery was not a guest sitting silently at the edge of a glittering room. She was the honoree. The ballroom was filled with the city's most powerful. Chandeliers glowed warmly, soft music drifted from a grand piano, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters gathered near the stage, cameras ready to capture the night's most important moment. When Ava entered, the room stilled. She wore a flowing silver gown that shimmered with every step, her baby bump visible and embraced, her sapphire necklace gleaming against her collarbone. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was radiating. William and Eleanor flanked her, proud guardians of her journey, while whispers of admiration followed her path. She's stunning. She survived everything and came back stronger. That's a real queen. The host took the stage, his voice echoing through the hall. Tonight, we honor a woman who reminds us all that resilience is power and dignity is priceless. Betrayed but unbroken, she reclaimed her voice, her future, and her throne. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our woman of influence, Ava Montgomery. The applause was thunderous, rising to a standing ovation. Ava stepped onto the stage, her heels steady, her chin high. For a moment she paused, looking out over the crowd, the same society that had once witnessed her humiliation. This time, they weren't laughing. They were celebrating her. She approached the microphone, her voice soft at first, but growing stronger with every word. A year ago, I stood in a room much like this one. I was invisible, humiliated, dismissed. I believed my silence was strength, but silence is not strength. It is surrender, and I will never surrender again. The room hung on every word. I was told I was nothing without my husband. But tonight I stand before you as proof that a woman is never nothing. We are mothers, daughters, leaders, fighters. We are enough, not because of the man beside us, but because of the fire within us. Applause thundered again. Many women in the audience wiping tears from their eyes. Ava placed a hand gently on her belly and smiled. This little one will grow up knowing their mother never bowed to cruelty. They will grow up knowing strength is not about wealth, but about rising when the world tries to push you down. And I hope every woman here tonight remembers the same. You are never powerless unless you choose to be. The ovation shook the room. Cameras flashed, recording the moment for headlines that would spread across the globe. Pregnant heiress crowned woman of influence. As Ava accepted the Crystal Award, the lights caught her figure and bathed her in brilliance. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was playing a part. She didn't feel like she was hiding. She felt like herself, fully, powerfully, undeniably. It wasn't just an award, it was a coronation. Because true royalty isn't about crowns or castles, it's about surviving the storm and still choosing to shine. The award still gleamed on her mantle, but Ava Montgomery didn't linger on it for long. Trophies were symbols. Her true prize was the life growing inside her. After months of chaos and betrayal, she finally had the space to think about what mattered most, what she would leave behind. The nursery had become her sanctuary. Each night, she sat in the rocking chair, reading aloud from storybooks she had chosen carefully. Her voice was soft but steady, filling the room with warmth. The crib stood ready, adorned with a quilt Eleanor had stitched by hand. Every detail carried love, not luxury. This was the foundation Ava wanted for her child. A home where respect, not wealth, defined worth. But legacy meant more than family. Sitting across from William in her office one morning, Ava laid out her vision. This fortune, these companies, they're not just mine. They're tools. I don't want my child to inherit money alone. I want them to inherit a world I helped make better. William leaned forward, pride in his eyes. What do you have in mind? Ava smiled, determination lighting her face. A foundation for women like me. Women discarded, silenced, underestimated. I want to give them the support I didn't have when I was standing in the rain with nowhere to go. Housing, legal aid, education. A chance to start again. Within weeks, plans for the Montgomery Foundation for Women and Children were underway. The announcement made headlines across the nation. Donations poured in, not because Ava asked for them, but because people believed in her story. Survivors wrote letters of gratitude. Volunteers signed up in droves. Ava's pain had become a beacon of hope for thousands. At the groundbreaking ceremony, Ava stood on the empty lot that would soon become the first shelter. Reporters gathered, microphones pointed, but she didn't speak as a businesswoman that day. She spoke as a mother. When my child asks me what I did with my life, I don't want to tell them I survived betrayal. I want to tell them I turned it into something greater. That I made sure no one else had to face what I faced alone. The crowd applauded, but for Ava, the true reward came later, in the quiet moments. A young woman approached her after the event, clutching a baby to her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Because of you, I have a safe place to go." Ava embraced her, her own eyes filling with tears. It was in that moment she realized her mother's dream had come full circle. She hadn't just survived, she had transformed survival into legacy. At home that evening, Ava sat again in the nursery, her hand resting on her belly. "You'll grow up in a world where women aren't silenced," she whispered to her child. "You'll know that strength isn't about money or power. It's about compassion, about standing tall when others fall. That's the legacy I'll give you." The baby kicked, as if in agreement. Ava laughed softly, her heart swelling with peace. She had been betrayed, broken, cast aside. But she had risen, rebuilt, and now she was creating something that would outlast her pain. Because true legacy isn't about what you keep, it's about what you leave behind for others to rise. While Ava's star rose higher each day, Daniel Montgomery's world crumbled into dust. His name, once spoken with admiration in business circles, was now whispered with ridicule in the dingy corners of bars and cheap motels. The empire he had flaunted to society was gone, stripped from his grasp by the very woman he had dismissed as nothing. After the press conference humiliation, his downfall accelerated. Lawsuits stacked on his desk like tombstones. Former partners demanded repayment, creditors circled like vultures, and regulators launched investigations into his shady dealings. Without Ava's silent protection, every corner of his empire was exposed for what it was: fragile, built on lies, and bound to collapse. Daniel tried to fight back. He hired lawyers, begged for investors, even attempted to smear Ava in the media. But each attempt only made him look more pathetic. Ava never fired back publicly. She didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than any insult he hurled. Her quiet dignity was his loudest defeat. Cassandra was the first to leave. When Daniel could no longer afford the penthouse, the cars, or the jewels, she vanished overnight. He returned to their hotel suite one evening to find her clothes gone, her perfume lingering faintly in the air, and a note scrawled in her perfect handwriting: "I didn't sign up for poverty." The betrayal stung, but it was also poetic. Daniel had traded a loyal wife for a glittering distraction, only to be abandoned when the glitter turned to ash. He had thrown Ava out with money at her feet, and now Cassandra had done the same to him, without even bothering to toss a dollar his way. Days blurred into nights. Daniel moved into a small, run-down apartment where the walls smelled of mildew, and the pipes rattled whenever he turned on the sink. He sat for hours staring at the empty bottles on his table, his reflection in the glass showing a man he no longer recognized. The sharp suits were gone, replaced by wrinkled shirts and unshaven stubble. The proud millionaire was now just another face in the city's forgotten crowd. One night, he stumbled into a bar and overheard a group of businessmen laughing. "Did you see her speech?" one said. "Ava Montgomery, what a woman. She's turned that company into gold." Another chimed in, "And her ex-husband? A joke. He's finished." Daniel's fists clenched around his glass, his knuckles white. Their laughter rang in his ears, louder than the music, louder than his own heartbeat. He slammed the glass down and stormed out, but the truth followed him like a shadow. He wasn't feared anymore. He wasn't respected. He was a cautionary tale. The final blow came when the bank repossessed the mansion. Reporters swarmed the gates, capturing images of Daniel's belongings piled carelessly on the lawn. The man who once threw money at his pregnant wife now stood in the rain, watching movers carry away his furniture piece by piece. Cameras flashed as he shouted at them to stop, his voice breaking, his desperation broadcast for the world to see. In the end, Daniel Montgomery wasn't remembered for his wealth or his ambition. He was remembered for his arrogance, his betrayal, and his downfall. And as Ava's name rose higher, his sank deeper, buried under the weight of his own cruelty. He had thought power meant control. He had thought betrayal carried no consequence. But karma had answered him in full. Because when you throw away loyalty for greed, the only thing you inherit is ruin. Cassandra Reed had once imagined herself untouchable. She had envisioned a future of luxury, glittering galas, red carpets, magazine covers, and a seat at the table of New York's elite. For a short time, it seemed real. She basked in the glow of Daniel Montgomery's fortune, dripping in jewels photographed on his arm. But as quickly as her rise came, her fall arrived even faster. The moment Ava revealed herself as the true power behind Montgomery Holdings, Cassandra's glittering image cracked. The society pages that once praised her as the stunning partner of a mogul now branded her a homewrecker and a social climber. Invitations to the best parties stopped coming. Friends who once clung to her side deleted her number. She tried to fight back at first. Cassandra called publicists, hoping to spin her image, but no one would take her case. Too toxic, one bluntly told her. Aligning with you would ruin anyone's reputation. Her modeling contracts evaporated. Sponsorship deals disappeared. Even the smaller brands that once begged for her attention cut ties. Cassandra watched helplessly as her bank account dwindled. Her credit cards maxed out from months of indulgence. The penthouse Daniel had once paid for was gone, the luxury cars repossessed. She moved into a modest apartment on the edge of the city, a far cry from the marble floors and chandeliers she once flaunted. The neighbors didn't know her name. The paparazzi no longer cared. Her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror showed not the glamorous mistress of a millionaire, but a woman stripped of everything she had built her identity upon. Worse still, whispers followed her wherever she went. At cafes, women glanced at her and shook their heads. That's the one who ruined her marriage, they murmured. Men who once chased her for her beauty now avoided her, afraid of the scandal attached to her name. One night, desperate for some reminder of the past, Cassandra dressed in her finest remaining gown and attempted to slip into a charity gala uninvited. She imagined the cameras would still flash, that someone would still remember her. But the security guard at the door stopped her cold. "You're not on the list, Miss Reed." "I've been to this gala before," she snapped, her pride stinging. "Not anymore," he replied flatly, turning her away. The humiliation burned hotter than any insult. She walked back into the night, her heels clicking on the empty pavement, tears smudging her mascara. In her loneliness, Cassandra tried to reach Daniel, but his number had been disconnected. She had abandoned him the moment his wealth disappeared, and now he had nothing left to offer her, not even comfort. For the first time, she realized she was utterly, devastatingly alone. As days turned to weeks, Cassandra was forced to take small jobs under fake names, modeling for catalogs no one read, serving drinks at parties she once attended as a guest. Each night, she returned to her dim apartment, staring at the faded photographs of her and Daniel in their short-lived glory. She had thought she was climbing, but she had only been falling all along. Her downfall wasn't loud like Daniel's. It wasn't captured on live television or splashed across headlines. It was quieter, crueler. It was the slow suffocation of obscurity, the death of relevance, the hollow ache of realizing she had traded everything for nothing. Cassandra Reed had chased gold, but all she found was dust. Because when love is built on greed, it always crumbles and leaves you emptier than before. The winter night was still when Ava felt the first sharp wave of pain. She had been sitting in the nursery, rocking gently in her chair, reading aloud from a book of fairy tales. The baby kicked as though listening, and Ava smiled, until the tightening in her abdomen made her drop the book to the floor. Her breath caught. This was it. Eleanor rushed to her side within minutes, her calm hands steadying Ava as she called for the driver. "Breathe, darling. You're strong. You've been strong through everything. Tonight you'll meet your child." The city lights blurred through the car windows as Ava gripped her aunt's hand, each contraction a reminder of how close she was to holding the little life she had protected through betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. By the time they reached the hospital, her body trembled with exhaustion, but her spirit burned with determination. Doctors and nurses guided her into a delivery room. The walls were sterile, the air filled with beeping monitors and hurried voices. Yet, amidst the chaos, Ava felt an odd calm. She had survived storms far worse than this, and at the end of this pain waited not loss, but love. Hours stretched like days. Sweat dampened her forehead, her hair clinging to her face. She clutched Eleanor's hand, whispering between cries, "I can't. I don't know if I can do this." Eleanor's voice was firm but tender. "You've already done the impossible, Ava. You can do this too. Look at everything you've survived. This is the victory." And then with one final push, a cry filled the room. A cry that wasn't hers. A cry that was new, pure, and alive. Ava collapsed back against the pillows, tears spilling freely as the nurse placed the tiny, wriggling bundle in her arms. Her baby. She gazed down at the perfect little face, the soft skin, the tiny fingers curling instinctively around her thumb. Her chest heaved with sobs, not of pain, but of overwhelming relief and joy. "Hello, my love," she whispered. "I'm your mother, and I promise, you'll never feel unwanted. You'll never be thrown away. You'll be cherished every single day." The baby's cries softened, as if comforted by the sound of her voice. Ava pressed her lips to the child's forehead, inhaling the sweet new scent of life. For the first time since her world had shattered, she felt whole again. Later that night, as the hospital room grew quiet, Ava held her child against her chest and thought of her journey. She remembered the rain-soaked night when Daniel had thrown money at her and ordered her to leave. She remembered the humiliation of the gala, the tears in the alley, the crushing loneliness. But now, with her child in her arms, those memories no longer felt like chains. They felt like stepping stones that had led her to this moment. William entered softly, his usually stern expression softened by the sight of mother and child. "Ava," he said quietly, "your mother would be proud. You've given the world more than an heir. You've given it hope." Ava smiled through her tears. "This is my real legacy," she said, stroking the baby's cheek. "Not the companies, not the fortune, this little one, and the strength it took to bring them here." The child stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Ava leaned back, her heart swelling with peace she had never known before. The storms were behind her. Ahead was love, unbreakable and pure. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in what you destroy, it's in the life you create after the ashes. Spring sunlight poured through the windows of Ava Montgomery's townhouse, bathing the nursery in a golden glow. The soft coos of her newborn filled the air, a melody sweeter than any symphony. Ava stood by the crib, gently rocking her baby, her heart swelling with a peace she had once thought she'd never find again. Life had changed completely. No longer the humiliated wife discarded in the rain, Ava was now a woman in full control of her destiny. She balanced board meetings with lullabies, business strategies with bedtime stories. The world saw her as the millionaire queen, but to her child she was simply Mama. And that was the title she cherished most. News of Daniel's downfall and Cassandra's exile continued to circulate, but Ava paid them no mind. They had already received their punishment, not by her hands but by their own choices. Their greed, arrogance, and betrayal had carved the path of their destruction. Ava didn't need revenge anymore. She had already won by building a life filled with dignity and love. One afternoon, as she sat in the garden with Eleanor, sipping tea while her baby slept nearby, Ava reflected aloud. "It's strange. For so long I thought my story ended the night he threw me out. But it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The fire that burned me also refined me." Eleanor smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "You turned pain into power, Ava, and you've shown the world that no woman should ever be underestimated." The following week, Ava stood once more before cameras, not at a gala, but at the opening of the first Montgomery Foundation shelter. Women and children filled the crowd, many of them survivors of betrayal and hardship, just as she had been. Ava stepped to the microphone, her baby nestled in Eleanor's arms, and addressed them with warmth. "I was once told I was nothing without a man," she began, her voice clear and steady. "But I stand here today to tell you that was a lie. We are never nothing. We are everything. We are mothers, leaders, dreamers, and builders. We rise not because the world gives us permission, but because we choose to." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping away tears. Ava looked out at the faces before her, women who had suffered, women who had fought, women who were ready to rise, and felt a surge of pride. Her pain had not been wasted. It had become a bridge for others to cross. That evening back home, Ava held her baby close and whispered, "You are my second chance. My reminder that life can bloom again, even after winter." The baby's tiny hand curled around her finger, and Ava felt the truth settle deep within her heart. The storms were behind her. The betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, they had all served their purpose. They had forged her into a woman stronger than she had ever believed possible. And now, her story was no longer one of pain, but of triumph. As the sun set, Ava stood at the window, her baby in her arms, and whispered a vow not just for herself but for every woman watching her story unfold. Never forget your worth. Never let anyone convince you that you are small. Because the world may try to break you, But queens are not made of glass. We are made of fire. And with that, Ava Montgomery closed the chapter on betrayal and opened a new one, filled with love, legacy, and unshakable strength. Because in the end, the sweetest justice is not revenge. It's living a life so radiant. Your enemies fade into shadows, while you shine brighter than ever. So that's where Ava's story closes, my wonderful friends. And if you're still here with me right now, it must mean something in her journey touched your heart in a special way. Maybe it was her pain, maybe it was her courage, or maybe it was the way she rose again when life tried to break her. Life isn't always fair. People betray, storms come, and sometimes we're pushed down so hard it feels impossible to stand up again. But Ava's story shows us that we can. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." The very things that tried to destroy her became the reason she found her strength. And that can be true for you too. So if you're facing heartbreak, humiliation, or loss, don't see it as the end. See it as the beginning of your rise. Pain can be a teacher, and healing can turn into power. If this story spoke to you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope tonight, and don't forget to subscribe. Because here, we rise together.